All right, ladies and gentlemen, Rapid Rod back in the house, back in the his house. I'm back again with another baby back rib recipe. This is going to be a very quick recipe. The other one I did was a 6-hour slow cooking rib style recipe. This one's going to be very quick, and it's inspired by a buddy of mine by the name of Ralph. Ralph the other day did a video, and he had some wonderful lamb chops. He had a lamb chop shank, and he did a wet rub that really inspired me to, hey, you know what? I know that wet rub, and I'm going to kind of do mine to my ribs. It's based in Dijon mustard, and I'm going to lightly dust the ribs in a dry rub first, as that is my way and my thing. I'm going to make a mixture of all of these ingredients and do a very light dusting dry rub. The wet rub is going to basically be what sinks in and really comes through and saves the day. In fact, when you use a wet rub, generally you don't need to use a dry rub because the mustard is going to soak right into the meat and give you all that wonderful flavor. But I just thought I'd do this quick video, 1, 2, 3, and just kind of get it out the way. Big up to Ralph, my boy in Delaware. Well, all right, let's get started. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, right now I'm going to basically, before we do anything, it's always worst things first, a little play on words, because I'm going to put in a little Lee and Perrins, Worcestershire sauce. You get it? Worst things first. I'm going to do a light rub of that on my ribs before I actually mix up my dry rub and put it on the ribs here. As I cook, I hope none of you are offended. I'm going to partake of a little bubbly. I have some of the wonderful Veuve, the Veuve Clicquot. And I'm going to have I'm going to sample a little champagne as I cook. And I hope you guys are okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I like to enjoy cooking and partake of a little bubbly. But we're going to put a little bit of this Lee and Perrins Worcestershire sauce as a rub to bind the dry rub to the ribs as we cook. Okay, I've turned the rack of ribs over, and the first thing I need to point out is that we've got to remove the membrane, because when you take the membrane off the back of the ribs, it tends to make the bite all the more tender. I didn't do that in my last video. I kind of bypassed that, but that's very important. And basically what you do, you just grab this membrane, and it pulls right off the back. And you just pull this right off, just like that. And that's the membrane. You can discard this. Some people boil it to make a little bit of a sauce, but I take it off and throw it out. And then we can begin the process of putting on the rub and the wet rub. Okay, so as I said, I flip the ribs on the other side, and this is the rub that I applied, and all you do is gently rub it, just like this. That's why it's called a rib rub. You gently rub it. Now you'll notice, and actually you're going to get all around the borders here, the bottom side. You want to make sure you incorporate that rub all the way around this slab of ribs. But if you might notice, I have different seasonings out. And when I do my wet base, I'm going to add all of these ingredients to make my wet base. I got my Jack Daniel's sauce here, which you really want to step up when you're going to do a wet base, especially on ribs, because this is where it really comes into play. Both my Tabasco sauces, my Grey Poupon for the Dijon, and then there's golden spicy brown mustard. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using spicy brown mustard as a wet rub instead of Dijon mustard. Dijon mustard is a little bit more flavored, a little bit more fancy, but you can certainly go ahead and just use the golden spicy brown mustard. And then of course I got just some regular clover honey, which I'm going to add to the wet rub because that honey is going to caramelize in the baking stage and give a nice brownish crisp cover to the ribs as they cook. And then minced onions, because we're going to put the minced onions in the mix, and we're going to make that part of the rub. And I've taken the liberty of already putting it in this little cup, this container, and I'm just going to mix the whole thing down. And you want to put a generous amount of honey in there. Don't be afraid, because it's going to sweeten up the ribs. It's going to contrast with the heat of the Tabasco sauce and the bite of the Jack Daniel's sauce as well as the mustard. It'll be a very, very nice compliment. And actually, this rub, it smells really good. The rub itself smells great. And we're going to go from there. Okay, so as I'm mixing up my wet rub, I've got all the ingredients in there. And you just simply apply it to the meat. You just put it on there and you rub it in. Now, I've been told by some people that they're a little bit antsy because I don't use gloves. But you know, I'm an old style cook. This is my food. I'm cooking it. My hands are very, very clean. And I don't feel any problem with getting my hands actually into the meat because that gives you a real good feel. I could take a spatula and do this. All right? I could use those rubber gloves and do this. But there's something to getting your hands in there and really feeling the meat and rubbing the wet base on it. So you can feel it really get into the meat, into the grain of the meat, and you feel exactly what you're putting on this slab of ribs. And basically this is what the rub looks like once it's all said and done. You don't have to put a tremendous amount on, you just do a very light covering. I did my dry rub dusting on it. I'm going to wrap these slab of ribs up in aluminum foil, nice and tightly, put it in the fridge for about 3 or 4 hours, and then right into the grill. See you then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and we're back. It's about 3 hours, 3.5 hours later. The ribs have been marinating in the refrigerator in our wet rub, which consists of Dijon mustard and spicy brown mustard and a bunch of other things, a little honey and some other stuff. We're going to put it in the oven that's been preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, in my previous video, I basically did another recipe that we slow cooked the baby back ribs. It's like 200 degrees Fahrenheit for a long period of time. But that's not this recipe. This recipe is more conventional. We're going to cook these ribs at its typical normal temperature, which is going to be 350. I'm going to put it in the oven about 1.5 hours. We will come back to the ribs at that point. I will uncover them, check and see where I'm at, and then probably cook them the rest of the way, stepping up the heat a little bit, uncovered without the foil, to ensure that we get that nice brown char over the top of our baby back ribs. So we're going to put it in the oven now, and we will see what turns out when we get back. And we'll be back. Okay, so the ribs have been in the oven about 1.5 hours, and we have taken them out of the foil. And this is the first wave of what they look like, having had the wet rub and the mustard sink judiciously into the meat. And as you can see over, right over on the side there on the right side, you can see the bones beginning to stick out a little bit, which is always your indicator that they're really getting tender, is also what we want. We're going for the tenderness on the meat itself. The meat is still not quite done completely, but you can certainly see how that mustard and that rub has really worked its way into the meat. And I would just say, I wish you folks could be here to smell the heaven that's coming off of these ribs. They just smell delectable with some of that brown sugar and some of those spices that we put in the rub, just smelling delicious. Now, what we're going to do now, I think I'm going to leave them uncovered. And I did say I was going to kick up the temperature and finish them off, but I think I'm going to reduce the temperature to about 250, cook them a little bit more slowly for about another 45 minutes to get them nice and done on the inside and begin to get that browning char on the outside. So instead of kicking the heat up, I'm going to turn it down to ensure these ribs are falling off the rib when they're finally done, and we'll come back to that as soon as we get it done. Okay, we've taken the ribs out of the oven, and again, they're still relatively light without the char and the brownness that we like, but we're still not quite finished. Now, the temperature's registering at about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. The book says ribs are done at 145 degrees. I'm going to stay with these bad boys a little bit because I do have to brown them on the top. One of my techniques, though, before I do that, before I sauce the ribs, I'm going to coat them with a little honey, just over the top like so. I'm going to brush this honey all over them. And what that's going to do, that's going to act as a caramelizer. So they'll put a nice finish on these ribs. And the ribs already smell sweet because a lot of the rub that I put on them, the dry rub, had a lot of sweetness in it. A lot of brown sugar and stuff were mixed in with the spices. And this is just going to take it over the top. I'm also going to mix a little bit of more honey in the ribs, the barbecue sauce itself. And we'll get back and we'll finish these bad boys off. Okay, what I didn't tell you folks tonight, we're going to do broccoli. And I actually had a little left over from the other night's meal. And I didn't want it to go to waste, so I figured we would just get this done. So I blanched them, sauteing them in a combination of one part butter to 2 parts olive oil. The critical thing about this is that butter generally has a high flash point, which means that it will burn quickly. But you know, when you mix the butter in with the olive oil, and the olive oil has a very low flash point, so it levels out, the butter doesn't burn, and when you saute your broccoli in this mixture, you get that wonderful buttery flavor without having the butter burn. Okay, ladies and gents, so here we have it. With the final saucing, we got the underglaze of honey on it, the nice wet rub with the Dijon mustard and the brown spicy mustard and the light rub. We're basically taking them out of the oven now, and we're going to take a sample piece. This looks like a good one. And we're going to see where we're at. And yes, it's nice and juicy. And I'm going to take a bite. Oh yeah. As I always say, in the infamous words of Emerald, oh yeah, babe. These are really good. And they have a very good texture to them. Not quite fall off the bone, but they're very good and extremely tasty. So, what we're going to do now is let these boys sit for a while and rest. And I will plate up the broccoli that I sauteed. And have another couple of ribs. And I'm going to grit, grease. I'm going to grit, and grease, baby. Thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen. This was just a very quick video. We're going to have another one coming out very quickly. We're going to do stuffed pork chops with crab meat and shrimp. I'm looking forward to doing that one. But for tonight, I want to thank you all for joining, and happy eating. Just wanted to give a shot of a side view of this rib. Beautifully cooked, nice and white, well done on the inside. And look at that juice. That is flavor that has been cooked in, slow cooked in. And that's exactly what we're looking for. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time.